and that was more of kind of an individual basis. But now we're talking about a team setting where multiple individuals have the same mindset of never giving up their faith in Christ. Now, mentioned it before, I was in the criminal justice program at D.R.S. Butler Tech, and one of the things they emphasize mostly is teamwork. You have to be a unit if you want to be successful. You know, because when you're out in the field and things go bad, you know, in kind of a darker term, our commander put it, when bullets are flying and people are dying, you're the one everyone's counting on to get the job done. The only people you have is you and the guys who wear the same uniform as you. There's no one else coming to help you. You got to get the job done together. And the only way you're going to do that is if you can count on each other and work as a team. So I was looking for a story where just maybe 2 or more individuals come together and they take a stand for what's right. They take a stand for Christ. And I thought the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be a really good story for this. So tonight we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3. We're going to read the entire chapter, and then we're going to go through it again and kind of pick it apart. So if you'll turn to Daniel chapter 3, we'll start in verse 1. It says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore at the time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at the time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou king hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, harp, flute, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is that God shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? And they answered and said to the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth into the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of the fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut into pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. And the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for letting us all come out here safely, and I pray that as we give this message, I pray that everything I would say would come for you and not for myself, and I pray that I could just be your messenger, and I pray I could be a vessel for your work. And I pray that everyone gets something out of this, and I pray that we can all learn what it means to stand together as a team and to pursue our faith in you and pursue our walk with you. And I pray that you just help us, Lord, to be more like you, and help us to come together and be a team and be a unit and care for one another more than we care for ourselves, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. So, reading through this, I'm sure we all know the story. It takes place in Babylon. We got the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and obviously they take the stand together. And we're going to read through it again. We're going to look at verse 1 real quick. It says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. And he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So we see here King Nebuchadnezzar, he makes this image, he makes this statue. It says it's, I believe, 63 cubits. Now, I did some really extensive research, meaning I used Google. I looked up how tall it was, and when it comes to stuff like this, I don't really tend to trust technology and internet, but it's what I've seen, it's about 90 feet. And if someone knows for sure, that's right. Yeah, it's about 90 feet, so pretty big statue. Now, if we continue on in verses 2 and 3, it said, Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the king Nebuchadnezzar, he brings all these important people together, and he's gathering them all together so they can worship this idol and this image that he's created. So they're all gathered around the statue, and they're getting ready to worship this idol and dedicate themselves to it. And in verses 4 through 6, it says, Then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So we see here it's basically saying when the music starts playing, that's everyone's cue to bow down and worship the statue. And anyone who does not bow down would be cast into the fiery furnace as punishment for not worshiping the idol. And in verses 7 through 13 it says, Therefore at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, the flute, the harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at the time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews who thou hast set over to the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. So we see the music starts playing, and everyone hears it, and everyone starts to bow down and worship the statue. And now, as we see in verse 8, the Chaldeans accuse the Jews. It says, Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. And they tell the king that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down and worship the statue. Everyone had bowed down and is now worshiping and praising a statue, but only these three men have refused to bow down. Now, given the character of these men, I believe, they probably, even if it was just one of them, they probably would have stayed standing. But I think, having God to your left, God to your right, having them stand up with you, I think that makes it a little bit easier to do. I mean, given the situation, there's tons of people, and the pressure's on to bow down to the statue. But what I liked here is that the three of them stood up together. Not one of them was alone. In our criminal justice class, we had a lot of sayings, a lot of mottos. One of our mottos was, in this family, nobody fights alone. Meaning that no matter what the situation is, no matter how bad something goes out in the field, in police work, or in the military, if you got your brothers by your side, they're not going to give up on you. They're going to be with you there till the end, and you're never going to have to fight alone as long as they're with you. And I think that's the kind of team environment we as Christians are supposed to have for each other. When someone's going through something, we need to be there for them, because at the end of the day, we know they do the same thing for us. So when you're having adversity, it's good to have a team. And I look around this room, I think we got a pretty solid team. It doesn't necessarily matter how many people you got, how little people you got. As long as you got a team that's dedicated and won't give up on you or on God, you're set. And you can handle mostly anything that's thrown at you. As long as you got a team centered around God, that's not going to give up on that. Now, and then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're being accused of not worshiping the statue, and now they have to face the king. And in verses 14 through 18 it says, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do ye not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast into the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said unto the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods or worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So King Nebuchadnezzar, he asked Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego if it's true that they did not fall and worship the statue. And of course, they said it is true that they would not worship the statue or serve his God. Now, what I like here, this is probably my favorite part of the story, is it's verse 18. In verse 17, he says, if it be so, our God will deliver us from this. But what I really like what they said in verse 18, it is, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So they're saying here is, we believe our God's going to get us out of this and he's going to pull us through this. But even if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow down and worship another God. We're going to stay true to what we believe in. We're going to stay true to God no matter what. Now, that's my favorite part because of how powerful that is. Like, even if this adversity we're facing, even if he doesn't get us out of it, even if we don't get through it, if he chooses to call us home, we're not going to bow down to any other God. We're staying true to this. And I just thought that was so powerful because there's only 3 of them out of maybe the hundreds, thousands, maybe more of the people around them who are all worshiping this God. And despite the circumstances, they say, no matter what, we're not giving in. We're not going to change our beliefs. We're going to hold on to our faith and to the God we believe in. Now in verses 19 through 23, it says, then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So after hearing their response, the king's obviously pretty furious. He created this statue for everyone to bow down and worship to. So as you'd see, when people choose not to do that, when he goes against the king's command, he's going to be pretty upset about it. So he orders the furnace to be heated 7 times more than it usually is. So this furnace that already is pretty hot, it's now 7 times hotter. It's so hot that even the king's mighty men from his army, when they took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace, it killed them because of the heat. That's how hot it was. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the furnace for not bowing down. And then in verse 24 through 27, it continues on and it says, then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and he rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and said, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. So we see, as they're thrown into the fiery furnace, the king is astonished because he sees something unusual. They threw 3 men in there, but now he sees 4. And then he says the 4th one looks like the Son of God. Now, they're in the fire furnace. It's probably hard to see, their exact faces and the details, but I think it's kind of powerful how, even though he probably can't see them very well, he knew the 4th one was the Son of God. And I think that shows the power of the presence of God and the Son of God. Even though he probably couldn't necessarily see very clearly, he knew who it was. When God enters the room, you know who it is. And I thought that was just really powerful. I thought that was pretty cool. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they walk out of the fire, and the people gather around them, and they see that the fire had no effect on them. Not even a hair on their head was singed. Their coats didn't change. They were all unharmed. and that didn't even smell like smoke. So everyone's pretty shocked and astonished at what just happened, and understandably, if you're in the situation, it'd be pretty hard to believe that 3 men were just cast into a fire and walked out perfectly unharmed. And in verses 28 through 30, it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own. Therefore, I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So we see here, after he sees what God has done for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he praises God, he praises the true God. Because after seeing what God was able to do for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, after seeing how he got them through the adversity because of their faith, he realizes that the God that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego worship is the one and true God, because that's, as he says, that's the only God that can do something like that. That's the only God that can perform a miracle like that. As you see, they all walk out together, not just one, but all 3 of them walk out together. And I like how the king, when he comes to this realization after God has gotten him through this, and then kind of makes you think that when you're facing adversity or you're thrown into your fiery furnace, if you want to put it that way, when God gets you out of it, when he gets you through it, you can use that to show others the glory of God. Kind of similar to my personal story about my tumor. When I got through that, I was able to share that with people, and I've been able to see firsthand that how people have been using that, it's how it's affected other people and gave others encouragement and hope. So we can use these times when we're in our fiery furnace, when we walk out of it, we can show others, like, look what God's done for me, look what he's got me through, and he can do the same thing for you if you put your trust in him. And the king Nebuchadnezzar commands that everyone should worship this God, because he's the only God that can provide that way. So in summary, we see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Babylon commanded to bow down to the idol and to go against their God and go against God and bow down to a idol or false god. And they have the honor and courage and integrity to do the right thing, and they remain standing and stay true to their faith and refuse to bow down to a false god. And then in kind of a conclusion, I want to just go through a conclusion real quick, and then I have some extra verses and some questions about the topic. When we go through adversity, I believe it's easier. It's not always going to be easy. It's going to be hard. Adversity is hard. But when you have a team that'll stand with you and will go through the fire with you, I think it makes it just a little bit easier to know that you have your brother and sister in Christ on your left and right that are willing to go through that with you. And it kind of gives you encouragement when things get hard. You can look to your left and right and know that these people, they worship the same God I do, and I know God's with us, because when two or more gathered in his name, he's there in their presence. So I think it's a powerful thing when we come together as a team. And when you're going through something, you should be able to have that faith that your church family and your team is going to be there for you and that they're praying for you. And kind of touching on last week, the same mindset of never giving up on God, and never giving up on each other. There's going to be times where we all go through something hard and we go into our fiery furnace. It's better to go in as a team than be alone. God didn't design us to be alone. He gave us each other so we can rely on each other and help each other up and encourage each other when we're going through adversity. So the main points here are teams are stronger than individuals. It's been said that a single stick is easily broken, but a bundle of twigs is hard to conquer. If you take just a normal stick, it's easy to break in half, but when you got a bundle of sticks, it's kind of hard to break all at once. And the second main point is teams can do incredible things. By yourself, you can only do so much, but when you have a team, you can accomplish great tasks. Now, I'm a big basketball fan. I don't know if anyone else in here is, but if you ever watch a basketball game and the team's in sync, and they're running the plays, and they're unselfish, and they're relying on each other and counting on each other, and They pass the ball around that's unselfish, and when everyone's working together as a team, it's a pretty cool thing. And the next point is stand with your teammates. Know who your teammates are and stand with them no matter what. As you look around the room, these are our teammates. This is our family. And in this family, no one fights alone. So no matter what someone in our family is going through, no matter what someone in our team is going through, stand with them no matter what. Because at the end of the day, I believe they do the same thing for you, and you do the same thing for them. And a team focused on glorifying God is unstoppable. When a team is doing the work that God has set out for them, that's powerful, and I think God's going to bless that, and He's going to encourage that, and He's going to give you what you need to get through it. Now, some questions to end off on tonight are, who is on my team, and how can I be a better teammate? Do I put my teammates before myself? Is my team focused on serving God? And how can I use my adversity or my fiery furnace to bring glory to God? Now, some extra verses. I'll just go through this to save a little bit of time. But I got these extra verses. I thought they were pretty cool, and I thought they applied to the team mindset of tonight's message. The first one is, if you want to turn there, it's Ecclesiastes 4:9-12. Now, again, I'm using technology, and when it comes to stuff like this, I don't really trust technology too much. It says KJV, but if it's not, just throw something at me, yell at me or something, and I'll read it out of the paper Bible. But Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken." Now the next verse is Proverbs 27:17. Proverbs 27:17 says, "Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friends." Basically, saying, when you have a team, iron sharpens iron, you're going to make each other better, and you're going to encourage each other to get better in your walk with God. And the next verse is Ephesians 4:16. Ephesians 4:16. It says, "From whom the whole body, fitly joined together and compacted by that which every joint supplieth, according to the effectual working in the measure of every part, maketh increase of the body unto edifying of itself in love." And the last verse I have is Hebrews 10:24 and 25. Hebrews 10:24-25 says, "And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." So the main thing I want everyone to take away tonight is that don't go through something alone. We're here. We're all together here for a reason. We're all a team. We're all a unit. And I know we can rely on one another when we need each other. So when we're going through adversity, we're going through our fiery furnace, we need to stand together and not as individuals, because we were meant to be together and we're better together. So we need to have that team mindset that we're going to put our teammates before we put our own selves, meaning we care more about them than we do our own selves. Because that's the love of Christ. He loved us more than he loved his own self, and that's why he died on the cross for us. So when we live that way, when we have that team mindset, we can do powerful things. We can do great things. And, the Bible distribution, that was a team effort. It would take a lot longer if it was just one person. Imagine if it was just Phil driving around doing all that by himself. It would have been a pretty difficult task. But when we come together as a team and we set out to do something like that, that's powerful. God's in that, and he's going to use that. So going forth, get with your team and be with your team and stand with them no matter what. Because that's ultimately what makes a difference. It's when we come together, and when other people see that, when, it's powerful when one person is sold out for Christ, but when people see a whole team come together for Christ and they see the work that can be done through that, they're going to look at that. They're going to be amazed by it. So I encourage you to be a team, be a unit. We're all a team here. And if we do the work as God set out before us and we help each other out, we can do amazing things. And he already has, and I believe he continue to do that. So always stand with your teammates. Thank you.
It was a long walk, sorry.